Hey guys, in this tutorial I'm gonna show you how to sew this basic top called cord. The pattern comes in 3 different lengths and I'm wearing the shortest one, which is length 3 in all of the photos and videos. It ends right above your waist and is thus perfect to pair with high waist pants and skirts. You can choose between a classic round neck top or a top with collar, which I'm wearing here. And this is the round neck top. The upper part is lined and double layered right up to below your bust, and that gives you the opportunity to add bra cups as a bra substitute, and if you want you can make the round neck top fully reversible. I'm using mainly my overlocker to make this top, and I would say it's definitely easier if you have an overlocker, but if you don't have an overlocker you can just use your regular sewing machine and use a small stretchable zigzag stitch. As there are no difficult sewing steps and it's a really quick make, I would say it's definitely a beginner-friendly project. To make this top you will need fabric, and knits with 60 to 80% stretch are suitable. I'm going to explain further what the stretch content means in the next chapter because it's really important. Suitable fabrics include viscose knit, rib knits, athletic knits, cotton knits or similar. Also you will need a stretch tree needle for the hem. Alternatively you can just hem with a small zigzag stitch instead. If you want to add bra caps you will need 2 bra caps as well as some elastic, which is 0.5 to 1 centimeter wide. Unfortunately, you cannot determine the stretch of a fabric by its composition because it also depends on the knitting tension, so I'd recommend to always make this little test to be on the safe side. First, I'm putting 2 needles in my fabrics in the direction of the greatest stretch with a distance of 10 centimeters. There is also a template which you print with your pattern that you can use. The pins are 10 centimeters apart, and now I will hold the left one and pull at the right one until I feel a little resistance. Make sure to pull moderately and not with all of your strength. And as you can see here, I can stretch it to 17 centimeters, which means this fabric has a stretch of 70%. And that would mean that this fabric is perfectly suitable for the top. It is also important not to pull with all of your strength. If I want, I would be able to stretch it to 20 centimeters, which would mean a stretch of 100%, but we don't want our fabric to have to stretch this much around our body. And that's why we should only pull moderately. If you feel insecure about your stretch content, I would recommend to enlarge your initial distance, because the bigger the distance is, the more accurate the results will be. So for example, if you grab a 26 centimeter wide piece and stretch to 84 centimeters, the formula would be 84 divided by 26 is 1.84, minus 1 is 0.84, multiplied by 100 would be a stretch content of 84%. As you can see here, the recommendations are: if your fabric has less than 50% stretch, it's not suitable. If your fabric has 50% stretch, I would recommend to pick one size larger. Between 60 and 80%, it's perfect, and you can just pick your regular size. And everything above 85% stretch, like 85 to 100%, is very stretchy, and you can size down one size. Let's start cutting, and here is an overview of all the pattern pieces that you will need. For the regular round neck top you will need 1 front, 1 back, and also 1 front lining and the back lining piece. For the reversible top, which is only possible for the round neck top, you will need 2 front pieces and 2 back pieces, all in the same length. And for the top with collar you will need 1 front, 1 back, 1 front lining, 1 back lining, and 2 collar pieces mirrored. No matter which version you're going to sew, it is important to mark the center front and the center back with a little notch at all of the pieces that were being cut on the fold, which are basically the front, back, and lining pieces. And if you're making the top with collar, it is important to transfer the markings with a little notch or with tailor's chalk. Next, we're starting with the neckline and armholes. I will show it for the regular round neck top first, then for the reversible top, and then for the top with collar, so you can jump in the chapters. Place your front piece lining right sides facing on your front piece and your back lining piece right sides facing on your back piece, and then pin those pieces together along the armholes and also the necklines. And this is what it should look like. And now we're gonna stitch along the armholes and necklines. We are stitching with a 1 cm seam allowance, and I'm using my overlocker. If you're also sewing with an overlocker, I would recommend to set your differential feet higher so that your seams get tight and won't wear out. I am, for example, sewing with the differential feet set to 1.3. This is what it should look like now, and you can now jump into the chapter shoulders. For the reversible top, lay both front and both back pieces on top of each other with right fabric sides facing, and then pin them together along the armholes, the necklines, and also along the hem. Now it's time to sew all these sections together with a 1 cm seam allowance. I'm using my overlocker, and I would recommend to higher the differential feed for the armholes and also the necklines so that this seam becomes tight and the seams won't wear out, while for the hem you can just put the differential feed back to a regular setting. This is what it should look like now, and you can now jump into the chapter shoulder seams. If you're sewing the top with collar, now lay the back piece lining right sides facing on the back piece and the front piece lining right sides facing on top of the front piece, and these pieces are now being pinned together along the armholes. Now stitch along the armholes with a 1 cm seam allowance. I'm using my overlocker and I'm setting my differential feed higher here to a 1.3 or 1.5 to make sure that this seam gets tight and won't wear out. Let's continue with shoulder seams, and here I'm showing how it should be done for the round neck top first, then for the reversible top, and last but not least for the top with collar. So you might be able to jump into the next chapter. If you're sewing the regular round neck top first, turn the front piece right side out, while the back piece remains with the wrong fabric side facing out. And then make sure to lay both pieces in front of you with the lining facing up. Now slide the front piece into the back piece right between the lining and the main piece so that the right fabric sides are facing. And now also the lining pieces should be together and also the main pieces. I will slide the shoulders of the front piece into the shoulders of the back piece. Make sure not to twist it. And here you can see how the lining pieces are laying together. And now you can pin the shoulders in place. Basically you are pinning 4 layers together here. Now stitch across the shoulders with a 1 cm seam allowance. I'm using my overlocker here. If you want, you can use your regular sewing machine and baste it in place beforehand with a regular straight stitch to make sure nothing slides and everything stays in place. If you're sewing the reversible top, now turn the front piece right side out, while the back piece remains with wrong fabric side facing out. If you're using 2 different fabrics for the in and outside, make sure that the same fabrics are now facing up. In my case, both violet colored fabrics are facing up, and now you can slide the front piece into the back piece through one of the open sides, so that now the right fabric sides are together and also the same fabrics are laying together as well. And now you can slide the shoulders of the front piece into the shoulders of the back piece and pin the shoulders together. You are pinning 4 fabric layers in place here. Now stitch across the shoulders with a 1 cm seam allowance. I'm using my overlocker here. If you want, you can use your regular sewing machine and baste it in place beforehand with a regular straight stitch to make sure nothing slides and everything stays in place. If you're sewing the top with collar, now turn the front piece right side out, while the back piece remains with wrong fabric side facing out, and at the front and also the back piece the lining should be facing up now. And now you can slide the front piece into the back piece right between the lining and the main piece so that the right fabric sides are together and also both lining pieces and the main pieces are together. And now pin the shoulders in place. You are pinning 4 layers of fabric together. Now stitch across the shoulders with a 1 cm seam allowance. I'm using my overlocker here. If you want, you can use your regular sewing machine and baste it in place beforehand with a regular straight stitch to make sure nothing slides and everything stays in place. Next we're going to sew the side seams, and here the steps are the same for the top with round neck and the top with collar. So if you're sewing the reversible top, just jump into the next chapter. Just fold both lining pieces upwards so that the arm seam meet, And then you can just pin along the side, starting from the hem of your lining piece down to the hem of your main piece. As I mentioned before, the arm seams meet and the right fabric side should be facing. I'd recommend to lay the seam allowances at the armhole seam in opposite directions to avoid bulk. Now this is what it should look like, and next we're gonna sew the side seam with a 1 cm seam allowance. If you're sewing with your overlocker, I would recommend to put your differential feet back to a normal setting, because the seam doesn't need to get any tight. This is what it should look like now, and now you can turn your top right side out. If you're sewing the regular round neck top, you can jump into the chapter hemming, and if you're sewing the top with collar, you can now jump into the chapter collar. Now pin the side seam together at the reversible top in a circle so that you are pinning only 2 layers of fabric together and you're pinning all the way around. I'd recommend to lay the seam allowances of the hem and armhole seams in opposite directions to avoid bulk. Next we're going to stitch all the way around with a 1 cm seam allowance, and here you will need to leave a turning gap, preferably at the side which is the inside for you. If you're sewing with your overlocker, I would recommend to sew all the way around and unpick a little section of approximately 4 cm after that. And if you're sewing with a regular sewing machine, I would recommend to leave the turning gap directly. The turning gap should be around 4 cm long. I'm sewing with my overlocker and I put my setting of the differential feet back to normal because this seam doesn't have to be any extra tight. This is what it should look like now, and I've sewn with my overlocker and I've sewn all the way around. And in order to be able to turn the top right side out, I'm gonna unpick a little section of approximately 4 cm now. And then turn the top right side out through your turning gap. Next we're going to close the turning gap. I'm using my hand needle so that this seam becomes invisible and you can wear the top from both sides. I'd recommend to use a thread in a matching color and then secure the end of your thread at the beginning of the turning gap, either directly to the seam or to the fabric. Then stitch on the inside right at the height of the seam allowance to continue the seam. And as you can see here, I'm stitching so that my seam gets a leather shaped look. Basically the stitches are like leather rungs. And once you reach the end of your turning gap, just pull the thread tight and then you can see that all the stitches disappear. Secure the end of your thread with few stitches and then pull the end of your thread inside the top right between both layers. And once you've closed your turning gap, your reversible top is done. I hope you enjoy your new top. Next we're going to sew the collar, and therefore you will need both pieces and fold them so that right fabric sides are facing, and pin them together along the short side. Next, stitch with a 1 cm seam allowance. And then turn one of your collars right side out while the other one remains with the wrong fabric side facing out, and then slide the one that you just turned into the other one so that right fabric sides are facing. Match up both seams and also both markings will meet, and then just pin the collars together all the way around. Also here I am placing the seam allowances in opposite directions to avoid bulk. And now it's time to stitch with a 1 cm seam allowance, and I would recommend not to raise your differential feet here, because otherwise the seam will get too tight and you might have problems to pull the collar over your head. Now turn your collar right side out and pin the bottom edge in place. Basically you are pinning 2 layers all the way around just to secure the bottom edge. And also here lay the seam allowances in opposite directions. Now take your top, and it's important that the lining is facing out, and the collar is now being pinned right into the neckline all the way around. The marking at the neckline meets the center front where we made 2 little notches, and the seam of the collar will meet the center back, and then just pin the collar into the neckline all the way around, and you are pinning 4 fabric layers together here. This is what it should look like, and I'm gonna sew the collar into the neckline using a 1 cm seam allowance. This is what it should look like now, and now you can turn your top right side out and continue with the hem. You can now try on your top and see whether you like the length. There are 2 cm of hem allowance included, and if you want you can shorten it, and if you're happy with the length, just fold the hem 2 cm to the inside and pin it in place all the way around. And next we're gonna hem with a 1.5 cm seam allowance. I'm using a stretched twin needle here, and I would recommend to hold the threads tightly when you start sewing, and also I'm setting the upper thread tension higher when using the stretched twin needle. From my experience, the seams will get nicer, but alternatively you can just use a small zigzag stitch instead. And this is what your finished hem should look like now. Your top is now done, but you still have the possibility to add bra caps or to hem your lining. I'm first going to explain how to add bra caps in this chapter, and if you want to hem your lining, just jump into the next chapter. First, take your elastic, wrap it around your body below your bust and cut it to size. It should fit tightly without cutting into your body. You don't need to add any seam allowances here. And then first mark the center and then mark the quarters. Pull out your lining and divide the lining hem into 4 equal quarters. basically by placing the sides on top of each other and marking the center front and back with little notches. Now pin your elastic to the right fabric side of your lining hem. The right fabric side is the one with the nice looking side seam, and then just match up the markings of your elastic with the markings on your lining hem. The ends of the elastic should meet at one of the side seams and they should lay right next to each other. Once you have pinned the elastic to the hem at the markings, you can now add another pin right in between. Me personally, I will leave it like that because I find it easier to sew it on like that. The elastic is shorter than your lining, which is normal, and here you can see how the ends are laying next to each other. Now sew the elastic to your hem lining with the regular sewing machine and a small zigzag stitch. Start at the side seam where both ends lay, so you can secure both of them, and then stretch the elastic to the size of your lining by pulling it. I would recommend to pull at the front and back at the same time. It will help your sewing machine. And this way just stitch the elastic to your hemline all the way around. This is what it should look like now. The elastic is sewn to the right fabric side of your lining, and now I will fold it once again to the right fabric side so that the elastic is covered, and I'm pinning it in place. And now once again stitch with a little zigzag stitch and a small seam allowance of 0.5 centimeter. Help your sewing machine again by pulling at the front and back at the same time. And this is how it should look like now. Now take your bra caps. I would recommend to try on the top and determine the position of the bra caps, and then pin the bra caps to the right fabric side of your lining. You are pinning the bra caps just to the lining. Make sure not to catch the top by accident, and also make sure there are no pleats or puckers at the lining, because normally bra caps are curved and it's a bit tricky to pin them. So just make sure that there are no puckers or pleats at the back of your lining. I'm showing the steps just for one cup, but you can do both at the same time. And then it's time to sew. Use a zigzag stitch and stitch right at the edge of your bra cup so that the needle lands right in the bra cup, and then it lands right next to the bra cup, and then in the bra cup again, and then just in the fabric next to the bra cup, and so on. And this way stitch the bra cup to the lining all the way around. This is what it should look like now, and here you can see how the needle lands in the bra cup and then right next to it in the fabric. Alternatively to the bra caps, you can hem the lining. It will look more neat on the inside, but the seam might be visible from the outside. That's why I usually don't do it. If you want to do it, just fold the hem of your lining 1 centimeter to the right fabric side. So you're basically seeing your side seams, and you're folding the bottom edge of your lining 1 centimeter to the right fabric side to the inside. Next, we're gonna hem with a little seam allowance of 1/2 centimeter. I'm using a regular needle and a small zigzag stitch here, but you can also use your stretch twin needle. This is what it should look like, and if you want, you can now secure your lining with a few stitches so that it stays in place and won't move. Therefore, pin your lining and main piece together along the side seam. And now we're going to stitch in the ditch, that means right on the seam, with a regular straight stitch and a thread in a matching color. I'm just running few stitches around 3 to 4 centimeters to secure the lining here. And this was the last step. Your top is now finished. I hope you enjoy your new top, and if you have any questions or feedback, feel free to leave a comment.